The Historical Impact of Abandoned Buildings by Kevin Fleischman and Dom Romania.
Well, old buildings and historic districts are the most palpable and obvious reminder of where we came from and where our ancestors, how they lived, how they interacted, how they did business together. This is old architecture, old districts tell the story like nothing else can. You can't go into a museum or a library and look at tiny models and really imagine it nearly as well as seeing the actual buildings. So there's something about the actual architecture, dating back to the pyramids. You have old ruins that stand the test, and trials of time. So here we are in Kingston, and we have hundreds of years of history. And this particular building, the Nathaniel Booth building, tells a very interesting story about an immigrant and how he survived here, how he managed, how he supported his family and worked with his community.
A building to most people is a couple of walls and a roof. To us, a building has more to offer than that. In the walls, you have years of history, and the roof has a story waiting to be uncovered and shared amongst people. These stories will tell us of tragedy, death, misfortune, and deception. Linwood Hall, Penn Hills, and Eastern State Penitentiary are just a few of the historical landmarks Pennsylvania has to offer. These buildings showcase the changes throughout history and still, to this day, are a part of history for us to remember.
Linwood Hall.
This 70,000 square foot mansion located outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was originally owned by Peter Errol Brown Widener. Peter Widener was a very successful businessman in the Philadelphia area. He is known as one of the richest men in American history. The architect of the mansion was Horace Trumbauer, and he was tasked to design a comfortable and spacious home for Widener and his family. The home was built out of limestone and had a T-shaped design. It had more rooms than anyone could ever use. Linwood Hall consisted of 55 bedrooms, 20 bathrooms, and a large ballroom and even an indoor pool. Widener had to have over 97 staff and workers just to run the home and keep up with the huge garden. Trumbauer brought on 2 interior designers to decorate and furnish the mansion. The whole project cost $8 million to build. The estate was pretty much self-sustaining with its own 117-acre farm and its own power plant. Oddly enough, this property had a connection to the famous RMS Titanic. Widener's eldest son, George Dunton Widener Sr., was a major investor in the Titanic. George, Harry his son, and Eleanor his wife planned to travel home on the ship's maiden voyage. Both George and Harry died when the Titanic sank, leaving the Linwood Hall to the Widener's only living son, who took over for all of the expenses and upkeep of the mansion. With the estate, he also received close to $60 million. Joseph had a few rooms of the estate changed, which included a large ballroom and a private art gallery. The property has since been bought by a few different religious groups who have in time sold almost everything from the original house. It is now owned by the Korean Church of New York, and they have not done anything with the house since buying it. Penn Hills Resort.
Escape with someone you love to Penn Hills, a couples resort designed for couples just like you. Penn Hills is nestled in the beautiful Pocono Mountains, where you can enjoy your favorite outdoor activities, from golf to tennis, or just soak up the beauty with your special someone. There's no place like Penn Hills. So come enjoy the romance of Penn Hills, a couples resort in the Pocono Mountains. For reservations, call 1-800-233-8240.
Penn Hills Resort was a honeymoon destination for couples in Analomink, PA. It was originally founded as a tavern in 1944, but slowly expanded into a large resort with over 100 rooms. In the 1960s and 1970s, the place was booming with people. After the 70s, the resort slowly started to tumble downhill, but still somehow ran until the owner died in 2009 at the age of 102. Closing 2 months after his death. After the owner's death, it was discovered that the resort owed over $1 million in back taxes, and employees never received their final paychecks. After this news, on top of the already serious disrepair that existed, everyone decided to jump ship. Penn Hills is located right off Route 447, a major roadway in the Poconos. The resort's iconic sign is visible from the road. People who live in the area said they've driven by hundreds of times, never thinking what might lay past that signage. The resort was known for its heart-shaped tubs, rotating circular beds, floor-to-ceiling shag carpeting, and wedding bell-shaped swimming pool, amongst other questionable interior design choices. However, one of the most exciting pieces of historical artifacts in the resort were the lighting fixtures from the 1964 World's Fair that dotted the grounds. Penn Hills, a resort lost in time. Eastern State Penitentiary. In the middle of urban Philadelphia is a great castle, a massive building. However, these walls weren't built to keep people out, but to keep them in. This castle is a prison. Opened in 1829, Eastern State was designed by the Society for Alleviating Miseries of Public Prisons as a new type of prison where order reigned and those housed within might have a chance to repent for their crimes. Eastern State was to be the world's first penitentiary. Compared to other facilities, Eastern State was a marvel and cost $800,000, one of the most expensive building projects of its day. Prisoners in Eastern State had their own private toilets. Inmates were served 3 meals a day and had their own private exercise areas. The cells each had skylights so that the wisdom of God might shine down upon those inside. In essence, Eastern State was a paradise compared to other prisons of the time. But despite all of its comforts, this paradise drove people insane. Known as the separate system, part of what made Eastern State unique is that the prisoners weren't allowed to interact with other prisoners at all, in any way. They ate alone, they exercised alone. They weren't allowed to talk to each other or to the guards. On the rare occasions, they were taken out of their cells. Hoods were put over their heads. Guards even wore felt shoe covers, so as to keep the prison as quiet as possible. Utter silence. It was meant to inspire penance. Instead, it inspired insanity. When Charles Dickens visited the prison in 1842, he wrote, "Tampering with the mysteries of the brain to be immeasurably worse than any torture of the body." But due to overcrowding and disapproval of the separate system, Eastern State changed into a more standard prison, known then as the New York system, where inmates shared cells and were permitted to communicate. The prison remained in use for 142 years, from 1829 until 1971. In 1994, Eastern State reopened its doors to the public. There is a Halloween tour hosted every year, along with regular tours throughout the year.
You choose, it's your history, to preserve it or to lose it.
Historical buildings are a story that doesn't have to move but says 1,000 words just in its appearance. These valuable places need to be understood, and the history behind them should be shared to our future generations to keep the spirit of these buildings alive for years to come.
Thanks for watching.